Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Arsaholics podcast. I haven't done the ladies and gentlemen before, haven't I? I made you smile once.
Yeah. Very formal.
Very formal. I hope everyone's good. Thanks for joining us. It's a Sunday night, bank holiday weekend in the UK, so it's the day after we've played Fulham at home to a 2-2 draw, which was a really, really eventful game. So much to talk about. It's still pretty fresh, I think, in everyone's minds. And Twitter was rampant yesterday and today, to be honest, with fallouts and deep dives and kind of emotional reactions and then emotional come downs and you name it, it had everything. And so to talk about it all, I've got Myers and Aaron with me. Hello, boys.
Hello,
Good
mate.
evening. You right?
Yeah, good. Let's jump in. I'm a bit more I'm a bit okay, well, better than I was yesterday, I have to say. Yesterday, obviously, you guys will know we all sort of felt the same sort of way. I think after the game, it was very low coming out of that stadium. It was a pretty rubbish feeling. But today, I've tried to kind of get my big boy boots on and just sort of think like, it's a long season. We didn't lose. It's just a draw. These things are going to happen. So I'm trying to be a little bit more measured about it all. Do you guys feel better from yesterday? Are you still as emotional? I know, Aaron, what I've noticed with Aaron is actually he's a little bit different. You're a little bit different. I've noticed, right? Because I think what happens is immediately after the game, I feel like we are all the same level of emotional. Yeah. And then and then I always feel like there's like a journey home thing. And maybe when you get home, I feel like you go up a level. There's like an added, you've like thought about it
You're
even
right.
more, and you're
he
like,
does. He does.
yeah,
Yeah.
you thought about it more, and you're like, do you know what?
That's social media, I'm guessing, because we're all on the train.
It probably is. Yeah,
reading Twitter and everything, and probably
because
working ourselves up.
It's because I spend the game watching it with you two, right? And you two are very.
All right, mate. Sorry, bloody hell. You make it sound like a chore.
No. You two are very
passionate.
No, yeah, you are passionate, obviously, but you're very. You're not reactionary. You guys are not reactionary, right?
I mean, in fairness, at the end of the first half,
Yeah.
I think the first thing I said to you guys is that's the worst half of football I've seen from us in years. Like, I thought the first half was awful. Now, actually, when I saw the reactions at the end of the game, I was surprised that I was like, because there was a lot of talk about people thinking, oh, actually, we created a lot and actually we didn't look that bad. I was like, guys, like the first half, I thought we were awful, like so bad.
I didn't think, to be fair, at half time, I was pretty chill. I was like, this is a bit rubbish, but whatever. I'm more of a like, okay, let's judge at full time, see what the result says. And I think, usually like immediately after the game, I'm like, let's react to the results. And then when I'm on the train home, we've gone our separate ways, I'm always like, then I start thinking about like the trend, and then I obviously am on social media, and social media is just full of angry people. And if the trend is negative, those social media people just make me start analyzing things and start thinking things. And then I'll listen to some reactions and podcasts and stuff like that. And then, I think I'm still a bit. I am annoyed. I think to be fair, like when we talk about the game, I think actually you can actually do the thing that I kind of did immediately post the game and on the way home, which is like you can look at this as one game, right? And you look at it as one game, I think you can probably say, okay, well, it's 2 points dropped, annoying, a few things went wrong in the game, couple of incidents, we probably win that game more often than not. That's cool. But then you look at that as part of the first 3 games of the season where, admittedly, we have won those first 2 games, but there are question marks, which I'm sure we'll discuss around the team selection, certain players, how we're performing up front, how we're performing at the back. And that's when I start to get a bit more concerned.
Do you want to elaborate? So
I think
are those things?
Ultimately, right, there's like I said, sounds very simple, right? But I kind of feel like going forward, we're not as good as we should be. And defensively, especially at home this season, last season, we just seem unable to really concentrate defensively, dominate possession consistently to avoid conceding so many silly chances. I'm sure a lot of people have seen the stat that we're the first team to concede in the first minute 3 times in a calendar year in the Premier League, which is mental. Now, you could say that's 3 random coincidences, but when it happens 3 times, you then have to start to ask, is there something genuinely wrong with the way we're coming out and setting ourselves up? I don't know. I mean, these are things you ask, right? Like,
well, let's talk about that point, though, right? Because the interesting thing about that is it wasn't like those 3 times have been 3 bangers, 3 worldies that, have just bypassed any kind of solid structural defensive strategy than we had. Like those 3 goals were basically us getting cut open in some way, right? Like in some it was like silly defending.
Cut open, yeah. Like
ways.
usually what happens is there's some player, a very fast wing or a fast wide player will come down the side and then cut us open, make us look a bit silly, and then there'll be a random collection of things that could go wrong. That will only ever go wrong once. We'll never see that same goal ever scored again in the same way. But like a very specific set of things will go wrong at the same time, and then we'll end up conceding, right? And it's more like we just need to stop giving opponents 1-0 head starts.
Yeah,
at the start of every game. Like, it's silly. It makes everything harder. The game state is harder. The Fulham's game plan, which was probably going to be let's sit deep and try and hold on to a 0-0 for as long as possible, is now, okay, we can sit deep for essentially 2 goals now, right? We can concede 1, we concede again. It makes everything harder. But yeah, like there's that. And then I just think the way the team selection, I don't know, what maybe before we I go off and rant and this whole episode becomes completely unstructured. Like let's take it back, right? Like,
well, because this is
team selection. Let's talk about team selection. Yeah.
I mean, but we can link team selection in some ways to the point that we've started on, which is this kind of conceding early.
Yeah,
because one of the things that people are talking about is, right, we've gone to this 3 at the back thing, which we never really did too much in pre-season, and for each game, we've had a different trio. And surely that must be causing some issues. But here's the thing. I mean, to the point that we're discussing, these 3 early goals we've scored in this calendar year, I think it's calendar year, right? Or whatever it is. 2 of those came last season. So 2 of them came when we were playing the old formation, if you like, the one that we really want us to go back to. So surely it's not a case where the reason why this happened yesterday, was purely because of this new untested sort of combination.
Yeah.
What is it? What is it that seemingly makes us, when the other team kick off, it's almost like right now we need to almost be, if we win that coin toss, we need to say we're kicking off. Right? That's almost what we need to say now to stop this happening. Why is it? What do you observe?
I mean, I think you guys, what you just said, mate, summed it up. It can't be down to, team selection or even system selection, because it's just, shooting ourselves in the foot and a lapses in concentration. I don't know why we've started so many games in that way. And you can't really pin it down to like a specific play. Like, you can't pin it down to, for example, it's a new player in the team, or it's, someone who's unfamiliar in their position. It was Saka yesterday. So with the loose pass. So honestly, mate, I don't know. And I'm sure Arteta's probably scratching his head as well to try and understand the reason why it keeps happening. It's obviously there must. I mean, I don't know, because I think all of those goals have happened at home, right? I think all 3 of them have been at the Emirates, and maybe there is like a little bit of complacency creeping in, or maybe there's a little bit of, we're not really, maybe underestimation of the opposition. I mean, who knows, mate? It's very hard to pin it down to a particular thing, but I definitely don't, like you said, definitely can't be down to a change in system. I mean, the evidence proves that. So you can talk about, like Gabriel didn't play. You can talk about Kiwior at left back, or Partey at right back, or Havertz, for example. You can talk about all these, different factors in terms of team selection and tactics. But I can't see it being down to that. I mean, yesterday it was just Saka just playing A very, very late. What should we call it? A lazy pass. That's probably the best way to describe it. Just a very lazy pass. Not really, obviously, not putting anywhere near enough onto it. I don't know if he was trying to hit it back to Ramsdale, or was trying to hit it back to a defender, but either way, it's just it's completely
just like into the space. It was
just it's basically a perfect through ball.
Random.
And then we've all seen it. My reaction when I saw the replays, and even actually at the game, I didn't feel like Ramsdale could do much. Like, we know that he's going to be up the field when we have the ball, when we're in possession. He's going to be, edge of his box or even further up. So he's out of position. He's all of a sudden got to suddenly start backtracking. Fulham get a bit lucky because I think Pereira mishits the shot, and I think Ramsdale just gets a little bit wrong-footed. He's obviously when you're running backwards and you're looking forwards, it's quite difficult, right? And you're trying to see what the hell's going on in terms of is he going to shoot? Is he going to pass? What's he going to do? And he just kind of trips over himself and just gets wrong-footed. I don't put any, because there were a few people around us that were a bit unhappy with how Ramsdale dealt with it.
He looks a bit silly in it, doesn't it? It's more the way it appears like.
But he's been put in that position. I mean, put it like this: if that's Havertz that makes that back pass, the reaction will be completely different.
Oh gosh,
or Eddie, for example, like a player that people love to criticize. The reaction's completely different. So we're kind of lucky in a way that it was Saka, because no one's going to say anything because it's Saka. But so there's a little bit of we're a little bit unfortunate in some ways because the Fulham player Pereira kind of mishits the shot, like I said, and Ramsdale basically stacks it. But equally, it's just, I don't know, man. I don't know, what do you guys think? Is it complacency? Is it not respecting the opposition? Is it thinking we can just come out and kind of do whatever we want and things will go our way eventually? I don't really know what it's down to.
Well, now I think it's now just become a thing. So I think that's the problem now. I feel like, especially now that it's happened 3 times, but even after it happened twice, I think our players now feel like, oh, crap, can't let that happen again. And the opposition also, I feel, know that as well. So the opposition are like, well, we might get at them in the first, a couple of minutes. And when it becomes a thing, when it becomes mental, it becomes a problem. It doesn't really matter about the systems that you play. It's just nervousness. It's, it just takes that little bit of conviction off. So I don't know. But Aaron, sort of reflecting this back onto the team selection, let's just talk about a general point around that selection, right? So again, different defensive combination, but everything else was the same apart from we had Trossard also come in for Eddie. So Trossard comes in for Eddie and Kiwior comes in for the suspended Tomiyasu. So just talking about that back 3 now again, it's again another game where someone else has come in. It's again another game where Gabriel hasn't been that person who's come in. Right. So now this is Kiwior in this left of a 3. It's a position which we played him in towards the back end of last season a few times when we started inverting with him. And he kind of ends up playing the inverted central midfielder role, but in a different way to how Zinchenko plays it. He sort of plays it as more of a quarterback kind of, sits there and he pings the balls, long diagonals, and that's kind of a different style. What did you think of that? Was your initial reaction to that this was a good idea, or were you also just perplexed, as many people are, around the continued absence of Gabriel?
Look, I think going forward, I was actually quite happy to see Trossard start up front. I think I might have even called it out. I said maybe Trossard and Jorginho might play because we might rotate, and I had no issue with that. In fact, I was very much looking forward to seeing Trossard play, and ultimately, it was pretty disappointing, but it is what it is. Defensively, I think, again, I thought about this quite a bit. I think it depends on, was Zinchenko available and fit, right? And I think if Zinchenko was fit and he doesn't play Gabriel, I think that's a big, big question mark on what's going on there with Gabriel. I think you can rationalize the team selection a bit, which say okay, he wants someone inverting. So he picks Partey. He picks Partey as the kind of midfielder. So then you have to play Partey at right back. Then you kind of say, well, who do I want in the 3 defenders, right? You pick Saliba, then you pick Ben White as the best right-sided kind of defender. And then you kind of pick Kiwior as the best left-sided defender, as someone who can kind of do that thing that you were talking about, Raj, sometimes pushing up, but sometimes stepping back and sometimes going out wide to kind of support the wide players, right? And if you look at it like that, you can kind of justify it, right? To say, well, actually, Gabriel doesn't fit if you're going to keep Partey as a kind of the defender midfielder role that Zinchenko normally does. So actually, it kind of makes sense that way. So I'm not really like that, like against it if Zinchenko wasn't fit, right? But I think the thing there is what you then do is you kind of almost say that I'm going to go with like leaving my second best defender on the bench, which is Gabriel, right? And that comes with a cost. And I think that the calculation Arteta has made is saying actually it's Fulham at home. I can probably get away with that. And you can't really blame him for not thinking that, right? Which is, okay, look, I'm going to play Partey, I'm going to play Rice, I'm going to play Havertz, I'm going to play Odegaard in my midfield. They're going to dominate possession. And to be fair, we did, right? The downside there is that actually the attack itself just wasn't working again. I thought Saka had a bad game. Havertz had a bad game. Trossard, I thought, was really bad. All for varying reasons, right? And I think, and maybe we'll go on to these individual performances in a bit, but then I think, look, I really want to, I just think that actually what we ended up with was a bit of a gamble that the manager took to say, I'm going to rotate a bit. And there might be benefits in the long run, right? You pay Kiwior now. If the Zinchenko is injured again, maybe you have something to fall back to because he's played the system now and we've played Partey at the right side. But when it doesn't work out and we ultimately drop points, then the manager does end up looking a bit silly with his team selection, unfortunately. But, you know, again, it's one of those where, like, look, we did the hard part. If we didn't do something stupid by going 1-0 down at the start, and we didn't do something stupid by losing concentration at the end, no one's probably talking about it. Everyone's probably saying, look, Arteta rotated a bit. He tried something different. And yeah, we weren't brilliant, but we got the 3 points. Well done and move on. But because of these, like, basically two errors, Fulham's only two real chances. Actually, no, they're the third one with Traore at the end. Like 2 or 3 chances, we were fine. We weren't brilliant. But because of the result, I think naturally you then start to look at kind of, okay, well, the second game we weren't brilliant. First game against Forest, we weren't great. Is there more to it? And this is the dilemma. I think overall it's still a bit too early, right? We play United and we smashed them 3-0. No one cares about Fulham, right? Let's be honest. Yeah. But if United, the performance and like going forward is not flowing, it's not moving, you then start to think actually something might be wrong here. That's kind of how I feel about it. I think, let's see. I think let's see what this team looks like with Zinchenko back. I've always said for a long time, last season the two players that really made our system were Odegaard and Zinchenko. And you take Zinchenko out, you really, really lose a lot.
Yeah, Aaron's talked a lot about perhaps the things that we need to start doing. Zinchenko's kind of one of those factors. He's just such an important part of all the good things that we did last season. So when you do compare the side that was out yesterday and the system and everything, it was quite contrasting to some of the good things that we saw last season. Arteta made this point though, right? And I remember, we were when we were looking at it on Twitter, we were trying to figure out exactly what it was that he said. But he said that effectively, if you compare how we played against Fulham on Saturday to the same fixture last season, we were 10 times better. As in, we were 10 times better yesterday than we were last season, even though we won last season. Yeah. Now, I think we were all kind of like, what the fuck? That's madness. Why is he saying that? You look at the expected goal stats. The expected goal stats do actually back that up, right? So the expected goal stats have about, yesterday, it was about 3 for us and 0.5 for Fulham. Whereas the season before, I think it was about 2.5 for us and 0.8 for Fulham. So in theory, we've created better chances this season. We should have, which we should have put away, and we restricted them to worse chances. It was hard, I think, to come away from the game and feel like, we put a performance that was 10 times better than anything. But, do you have some sympathy for that? Do you have some sympathy to say that some of the stuff that we were doing might not have been as easy on the eye as it was last season, but it's still effective, if not more effective? Do you buy into that?
Well, one of the on the XG point. So yeah, I saw the stats around the XG, and it kind of proves what Arteta said. But I guess one of the, I don't know if we got a penalty against Fulham last season. I can't remember now, but obviously we had a penalty yesterday, and that would have dramatically improved our XG yesterday.
Yeah, good point.
I mean, I think there's a part of that is he's got to say, like, not he's got to say that, but he's going to say something along those lines because the players are probably feeling pretty down. There's probably like maybe concerns or maybe like a question mark. I don't know what you call it, but just amongst the camp, we haven't started the season in the way we did last season. Last season was Gabriel Jesus came in, Zinchenko came in, Saliba came back. We went to Palace and we smashed them. Not smashed them, but we beat them comfortably. We went to Bournemouth, beat Leicester at home. It was a fantastic start to the season. It was obviously off the back of a very bad end to the season before where we finished fifth. So like everything was fantastic. And this season started a bit differently, right? Certain players haven't really kind of clicked yet or haven't, it feels like certain players it just hasn't really happened for them yet, especially the attacking players. There's question marks about the system. There's question marks about team selection. So maybe that's just Arteta saying what he needs to the media and to the fans to kind of deflect a little bit. I mean, and I think all top level managers, all Premier League managers probably do that to a certain extent. So I don't read into those comments too much. I think Aaron had said it. We're 2 mistakes away from winning yesterday's game, if you know what I mean. Like that, the game yesterday is completely different if we don't concede in the first minute, because I think they scored just inside a minute, and we probably had the ball for the entirety of that minute up until Saka gives it away. I don't know, but like it felt like we started the game as we should in terms of we got hold of the ball, passing it around, getting everyone a touch, getting comfortable, and it felt like, okay, this is an Arsenal home game. We should start creating chances soon and hopefully we'll score. And then obviously that happens out of the blue. And so that changes the whole kind of complexion of the game. And it means that we're chasing, and we got ourselves into a position where we were very close to winning the game. And that's what we needed to do. Like you said, Raj, like for you, it felt like one of the worst performances, if not the worst performance you've ever seen at home at the end of the first half. And so for us to turn it around and the subs to work, and I know we're going to come on to that, for the players that came on to have an impact and for us to get the 2 goals we needed, like fantastic. So like I have a tiny bit of sympathy in that sense, but equally, like if we're going to be a serious team and if we're genuinely going to compete with City this season, and not just in the league, but if we're going to have a crack at the Champions League, then these mistakes, we have to cut these mistakes out. Even the second goal, their second goal, the Fulham equalizer, it's like, I don't know how you explain that, but that was like, they were just statues. No one did anything. And you kind of know what's coming, right? They're going to load up the box. They need to just put in one good delivery. And I don't know. Can't even explain that just as much. I can't really explain the first Fulham goal. So yeah, I mean, I can kind of see where Arteta's coming from. I don't read too much into it, like I said. I think it's more important that these players start to realize that these games are decided by very, very fine margins. And we should have learned that lesson last season. Like when it got to the end of the season, we dropped points against like Liverpool, for example, last minute, whatever, like Trent nutmegs Zinchenko, puts a cross in and we concede a goal. West Ham, we miss a penalty at 2-1 up, and then Saka misses the penalty and then they go and equalize. Like very, very, very fine margins. And so we need to learn that lesson quickly, because otherwise it's going to be a season, like potentially it's going to be a season where we might come pretty close, but we might not do quite enough to genuinely challenge City or to genuinely have a chance of actually coming above them. Yeah,
I agree. I want to get onto individuals and how those individuals are playing in the system and a bit about that in a second, because we have to, because to be honest, some of these individuals are being discussed very heavily on Twitter. So I really want to get into that. But Charles has just put a question to us. And I think it's an interesting one if I have sort of understood it correctly. So just reading this question out, Charles is saying, also would love to get your take on if fans should expect the pre-World Cup pace of last year with a lower quality team, or now with a higher quality. Is it that we cannot do that form? If yes, what reasons? So I think what Charles is saying is, we had such a fantastic form pre-World Cup last year, and the team was not as good as the team is right now. And is it fair for us to expect, a higher level of performance? Aaron, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was actually going to comment on something similar just before he asked the question. So thanks for the question, Charles. Look, I think the one thing that I found really interesting was the atmosphere in the ground yesterday, and actually to a extent the first game, which is there's like now we've got a team that is, at least that we think is almost capable of winning the league. There's this expectation that we need to be doing better. And look, a 2-2 draw at home in Fulham in any season is disappointing, right? But we know, especially after last season, where we were like the first half of the season, I think we were on pace for 100 points come up to Christmas, right? We basically won every single game except for one or two. I think United was one of the big blips. There is no way we're going to be able to repeat that this season, right? Because we were so good. And actually, we came across a bunch of teams at bad times, and everyone else was kind of rubbish at the same time as well. So I don't think there's any way that we can replicate that. And actually, look, if this is a one-off draw to Fulham and we win most of our other games, I think we'll be okay with this, right? But this is the reality of when you're in a title race with Man City, that you know they're going to be perfect. You know that any time they drop points, like we had this psychological scar from last season where we were, I don't remember how many points ahead in March, April, and they still caught us, right? And we know that we are going to have to be so good, basically perfect, that actually for some people, I saw some very, very over the top reactionary tweets saying, oh, we've dropped points to Fulham, that's the title over. Like it's not that dramatic, and we know that's not true, but there is a pressure in the crowd now that I see, that it's almost like less. Like last season was fun because we were on this wild ride where we were like, okay, we're in a top 4 race, and all of a sudden we found ourselves top of the league at Christmas, and everything's like, well, what the hell's going on? Now we've got a squad where I actually need to go and do that again. I think there's a bit of pressure in the crowd. I don't think the players feel it yet. I don't think the manager feels it, but I think as fans, we are feeling the pressure a lot more, and that's reflected in the ground. It's reflected with some of the negativity. It's reflected with some of the social media. So, yeah, that's kind of my observation. Do I think we'll be top at Christmas with like basically 45, 50 points? No, I don't. Because I think the league is much better this year. There's a lot more even. But the good thing about that is that hopefully more teams than us will think they're able to take points off City. And that's what I'm kind of banking on.
All fair points. Do you have anything to add? If we look at it from this lens, perhaps we were this really solid, awesome team last season who finished second to, the best team in the world. Yeah. And we're obviously sort of, we've been on a project. We've been on a journey, but we're not starting that journey. Arteta's kind of, had a couple of seasons now. So you sort of think that, based on that logic, we've sort of had this evolution. We got really good at the end of last season, and now we've added a couple of big value players. Yeah. So Rice, Havertz, they're big value players. And in theory, what you're doing is you're basically saying, I know what I want to do. I've got my squad. Like, we're doing really well. We've got a culture. We've got everything. That's all in place now. And now I'm adding ceiling raisers. Yeah. So, you logically should, I suppose it's fair to assume that all you're really doing is adding to your level. Like, there's not going to be a deterioration. There's not going to be and now we're going to have to kind of get worse before we get better. It's kind of, you feel like maybe, or as a fan, you expect that you're adding this super talent to a very good team, and you're just going to get even better immediately. Is that unfair? Because clearly, on the basis of what we've seen so far, and yes, we should, be clear that we haven't lost a game. We've won 2 and drawn 1. It's hardly bad, right? But the fact is we're not playing the football that we were used to last season. Is it just as simple as we need to have a lot more patience? We need to accept that maybe things aren't going to be as fluid, or should Arteta sort of be introspective at this point and think that we should already be doing better?
It's very hard to be critical, if you think about where we've come from, it is obviously yesterday was frustrating, and it should be frustrating. But then you kind of look at the big picture and you take a step back and you sleep on it, we all did. And you kind of feel like, okay, yeah, like you said, Raj, we're 7 points out of 9. It's not the end of the world. Still very, very early on. So the reaction, I feel like a lot of the reaction that we're seeing now is because the Havertz thing, I think, is a massive factor. And I feel like Havertz will come good, and I think it will work. But obviously that's going to take time if that's going to happen. But obviously fans just don't have that sort of patience anymore. And I think that's one of the massive reasons why there's been such a big reaction to kind of this new system, where people have just said, fans have said, it's just not working. It's just not working. Why are we trying with it? And then Vieira comes on in the second half and puts in a performance that no one expected to see, but puts in a performance that we've all been waiting to see. And it's right, this is what a player in that attacking role should be doing. And that's kind of fair enough. I mean, look, on a more general basis, I have the thing that I struggle with is, right, even if we get better, which we're not necessarily showing right now in terms of performances, and you look at the result yesterday, but even if we get better, it still doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to catch City. So even if we've spent what we've spent and we've brought in one of the best defensive midfielders in the world, let's say, or definitely the Premier League, it still doesn't mean that it's a given that we're going to finish second this season. It doesn't, it's not a given. And it definitely doesn't mean that, it probably gives us a better chance of catching City, but then equally, we keep saying it, Man City and Man City. So I don't know. I just think that it's to maintain that level of consistency for the entire season, which is what City do, and they always come good at the right time. They stayed in touching distance of us the entire season. They had a couple of blips, but then when it came to let's say March, April, May, but especially around that March, April time, when Arsenal started to face a bit of pressure and results started to dip a little bit, they pounced and they knew what to do, and they were the most consistent team. And that's where we have to get to. And I think that it's a different Premier League now. You go back 15 years or whatever, every team that won the league lost a few games. They drew a few games. The Invincibles drew a bunch of games. It's just very, very different now. So I kind of feel like the pressure is there because we've spent the money, and the pressure is there on Arteta because it's another season into the project. But I also kind of feel like you can't just say, I don't think it's fair for anyone to say, if we don't win the league, then it's a failure, because you've got to look at who we're going up against. I fully expect, and I feel like we should give them a good challenge this season. I think that we should do. But if we don't win the league, we could hit 90 points and not win the league, for example. That's not failure. So, and that doesn't matter if you go and spend 65 million on Havertz and 100 million on Declan Rice. That's not really relevant. If you're hitting 90 points, you're doing what you need to do, really. It's just that the team that you're competing against are just on another level. Yeah, and the pep factor as well. So yeah, I don't feel, I feel like and I think it is a bit early as well. I think it is a bit early. I know we're going to talk about Man United and that game coming up, but I think you can see what Arteta's trying to do in terms of he's trying to build systems that we can rely on later on in this, or not rely on, but we can utilize later on in the season, maybe in future seasons as well. But obviously this season, there's going to be certain games, certain situations where he wants to change it up tactically, and potentially he knows what happened last season. Saliba was out, Zinchenko was out for periods, Jesus was out. Like trying different things with different players and using the squad so that if that eventuality happens, or if that situation comes again, then we have a plan B and we have a plan C. And okay, it hasn't worked in terms of performances yet, and we've dropped some points, but we might also look back on this period at the end of the season and be quite kind of thankful that he tried it and we tested it. And then there might, like I say, there might be games later on in the season that we're going to need to rely on this sort of system, and players are interchangeable within the system. So when it comes to sort of crunch time, basically. So yeah.
Should we take inspiration in that way from what Man City did last season? If you recall, towards the beginning of the season, all the pundits were scratching their heads and wondering why Pep was doing really seemingly random things with his team. And, I remember Gary Neville a number of times saying something just doesn't quite look right with this City team. And Pep's just trying too many things. There was the whole Cancelo situation. There was Rico Lewis kind of, being thrust into the spotlight. There was all this stuff, and people were just there wondering, we had this epic team from last season, and you added arguably the best kind of striker prospect stroke, just machine cyborg thing to your team. Surely all you needed to do is do what you did last season, but now with this guy, Haaland, right? But he didn't do that, right? Pep at the beginning of the season was doing all kinds of stuff. And in the end, they go on and win absolutely everything. And, just did, the unbelievable, basically. Do you take some inspiration from that? Do you take some kind of solace that maybe Arteta thinks that, do you know what, when I need to, I will go back to doing some of those things, but I'm building some of these new ideas. I'm making sure that we're unpredictable, we're flexible. So when I need to go to these things in crunch games, I'm going to be able to do that. Do you think that's too optimistic, or?
No, not at all. Because look, we signed Zinchenko last summer, and we had Tierney as a left back, and he is a fantastic left back. And no one really predicted what was going to happen with Zinchenko and how we were going to play this new system, and Zinchenko playing in midfield, and basically displacing Tierney. And now Tierney's basically left the club. So like no one predicted that 12 to 15 months ago, whatever. So yeah, just over a year ago. So like, and I think if that hadn't have worked out, like I said, we had a great start of the season last season, and kind of everything went to plan, let's say. If that hadn't have worked out, then I'm sure there would have been criticism going at Arteta and going at team selection, or why is Zinchenko playing? Why are we trying this new system? It's not working. Results are not, results aren't as we're not getting the wins that we should be. So yeah, that I think I keep saying this. I say this when it comes to the signings that we're making, and that includes players like Havertz. And I say this also, I think it applies to, let's call it systems or tactical setups. I feel like Arteta he's got credit in the bank basically for what he's done up until now. I don't, I think we are in a position of, we're in such a good position in on so many levels that you think back 3-4 years ago, you think back to how the football was under Emery. It's the club, the team's been transformed, and I know we've talked about that and everyone knows about that, so I'm not going to go on about it. But I think we just sometimes need to put things into context a little bit. It does feel like one bad result, everyone loses their shit, and it is a bit over the top. And I think everyone does need to calm down a little bit. I'm kind of, man. I say this now. If we lose to United on Sunday, then I think
it's a different thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Aaron, Kai Havertz, almost. I feel really sorry for him in some ways, because he almost is the poster child of the new formation, if you like, right? Because let's just say if Kai Havertz wasn't around, Declan Rice can play the 6. He can play kind of various kind of central midfield kind of roles, and I don't think anyone is pointing to Declan Rice at the moment saying, "Oh, Arsenal, have changed system from a good system last season just to fit in Declan Rice." No one is saying that, but everyone is sort of saying, "Well, Kai Havertz has been integrated into the system, and in order to integrate him in, it's all changed." And the Forest game, people weren't giving rave reviews. The Palace game, people again were struggling to see kind of, what he really added. And he was getting a lot of stick from a lot of fans on the weekend. And obviously when you don't win, that noise gets louder and louder. Now, I'm really I know that you, after the game, were pretty upset with Kai Havertz. The evidence is there on Twitter, and I'm actually happy about it because, I think that we needed at least one of us to represent that view, because it is a view that our fan base, a huge amount of our fan base holds. Like Shani is saying here in the comments, with millions of fans, blame Havertz. I mean, that is an extreme statement, but a lot of people are basically saying that. Can you give me your view and make a case for that, if you like?
Yeah, look, I don't think Havertz is the reason we drew, right? I think, again, it's more like in this game, as a one-off, two freak goals. That's not big. We didn't concede those 2 goals because of Havertz, right? Our attack didn't look rubbish just because of Havertz yesterday. But I look at the first 3 games in the league, and I just don't see it, right? And I'm not saying he will. I hope he comes good. I back the manager. I said this when we signed him. Said, look, I don't get this signing. I don't get, based on what he's done at Chelsea, I don't get it. But the reason I am backing him is because I fully believe that Arteta is one of the best managers in the world, and I fully back the manager's ability to get the most out of him and his talent ID and everything with it. And that could all still be true, by the way. And I obviously hope it happens, right? But look, I think the problem with Havertz is that everyone has their biases, right? And he comes in with bias. That actually, we've seen him for 2-3 years at Chelsea where he got mixed reviews. And I think the way I explained it a few episodes ago was like when Jurriën Timber came in, you saw immediately this is why we signed him. When Declan Rice came in, you saw 100 million. This is why we signed him. It's been 3 games. Havertz in this left 8. It's not working so far. And I think that's what it is, right? And there are times where, and what I'm trying to work out is it not working because he just doesn't get the system, and the system itself, because of personnel around him, isn't working as well, or is he just not able to do it, right? And that's the worry. If it's a former, and actually you say, look, he's been surrounded by, he's not really had a consistent left back to play with. I think the idea is maybe he was brought in to play with Zinchenko, and he's not been able to play with Zinchenko. He's instead had to play with Kiwior, Tomiyasu, Timber, and you can kind of say that left side hasn't really been optimal for a little while, and he's still figuring out where to stand, whatever. I think that over time it might come good, but I think there were just so many moments yesterday where I think, he doesn't help himself, because we've talked about this before. He has this demeanor where he's not a sprinter, right? He's not a Declan Rice who will be positive body language, running around, putting tackles in, sprinting from man to man. He covers his ground. But he's got this body language which almost makes it look like he doesn't care. Although I'm sure he cares just as much as any other player. It just looks like he doesn't care. So he's a very easy target for fans to jump on his back. But look, I don't think he's been playing well. I think it's as simple as that. Him, and there's been a few others, but I think consistently, if you look at the first 3 games, is there a player who's played consistently average to poor in the first 3 games? I don't think there's a player who's been worse than Havertz. And that's kind of my view. And then you think, look, if Havertz had come in one game and just done for one game what Vieira had done and been rubbish for the next 2 games, I would have been like, look, there's something there. We've got something to go off. We know why we've signed him. And we've seen him have his moments. If he'd got an assist, if he'd, scored a brilliant goal, and you think, that's why we bought him. But we've just had pretty much nothing. The only time it's worked, I think, is in the Community Shield, where he played out of position up front. And his position that isn't really why we bought him, and we thought that's not his natural position, where he was playing up front, and he looked all right there. But in this role, something isn't right. I don't know what it is, but as a left eight, he's just, if you're being kind, just not on the same wavelength as everyone else. He doesn't get the system. If you're being harsh, you say he's just not good enough to play that role for us in the system. I'm leaning towards the former, where I think he just doesn't get it yet. But some fans might say actually it's the latter and that he's not good enough. I don't know.
I think you've put it quite well. And I think it is one of those things that is very early to tell. I saw some tweets going around today about listing out Arsenal players who didn't necessarily do it from day one. People even called out Dennis Bergkamp as someone who didn't hit the ground running, and it took a while. Now, it's really unfair to compare anyone to Dennis Bergkamp in that way. And also, if you're being harsh on Kai Havertz, Kai Havertz has been playing Premier League football for a few years, so this shouldn't be that element isn't a new concept. Do you think though that with any new player, obviously joining a new club has its challenges, but he's also joining a new club who themselves are doing different things on the pitch, where you've got other players who are getting used to this system, who may have an advantage over him in that they understand each other a little bit better. But the fact is, the rest of the team still aren't quite fluent at this system. So you basically got a guy who doesn't know his system, doesn't know the system at all, playing with a whole bunch of other people who are also still learning the system. Do you think that we need to give him that? If we're looking on the bright side, do we think that it's fair to say that, or do you think that for a 65 million or whatever it is player who who's already played in the Premier League, who's come to raise the ceiling, we should be expecting him to look even kind of, if it isn't about the system, show moments of brilliance or show moments of kind of class that justify the price tag already?
Yeah, look, if we're being, Aaron put it really well, I think, and I think the way that you explained it, Aaron, is probably, I wouldn't say it's changed my mind on Havertz or anything like that, but it does make you kind of realize, probably expected a little bit more. Like you say, a little moment of magic, a defense splitting pass, something, maybe even just putting himself about a little bit more to show that he cares, so. But I do give him, if you look at the rest of the attack, for example, and we said this, I think post Palace, so before we played Fulham, the attack hasn't really clicked yet. Like Saka, we're not really getting the best out of Saka yet. Martinelli, I would say, has had a bit of a weird start to the season. I'm not really sure what to make of his start to the season. Erdegaard's coming for a lot of criticism. I saw people putting together compilation videos of Erdegaard where he's dropping really deep, picking up the ball, and then he's just passing backwards, which is obviously not what his game is about. And are all of these things, and you add Havertz into the mix, are all of these things as a result of the new system? And I genuinely, we all, because we've seen it in action, right? With the defense that we played last season, Gabriel coming in or being in the team, Zinchenko at left back, Ben White at right back. We know what that gives us. We know what to expect. And I just wonder, I've said this a few times already this season. You put Ben White back at right back. Does that give Saka? Does that just basically enable Saka? Does that unlock Saka? And for him to be able to do what he was doing last season, when you think of Ben White being the guy that overlaps, being the guy that takes away a defender, takes away a left back and allows Saka a bit more space, that Erdegaard, White, Saka kind of combination on that side was really good last season. And then also when you think of Zinchenko coming into midfield, does that then just give Havertz a little bit more freedom to kind of go and do something in the final third? Because it's obviously hard from where we sit, right? Because you don't get a good perspective of the entire pitch. But to me, it felt like Havertz was dropping. Was he dropping? I don't know. I think he was dropping quite deep to get the ball again. And I don't want to, we don't want to see him there. I don't think that's where he's going to be effective. And I think if you bring Zinchenko back into the team, you basically would have, let's just say it's Declan Rice and then Zinchenko in midfield, and then everyone else can kind of, it gives other attacking players or the attacking players a freedom to do what they need to do. So I give Havertz a fair bit of leeway in that sense, because like you say, Raj, it's a new system. He's trying to fit into a new system that just hasn't worked for basically everyone. So, and he is going to come under criticism, or he's going to come under scrutiny because of his price tag and because he's a new signing, because it didn't work out for him at Chelsea and all of those reasons. But I don't know. I think Arteta probably needs to look at this now and potentially just say, just from a kind of good management perspective, unless he feels like he's essential to the way that we are going to play, is it not better to just take him out of the firing line for the United game, revert, and we're going to talk, I know, sorry, maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but revert to norm or to type basically, and go with what we are used to last season, and then just use Havertz as like an impact play, because I honestly feel like he could be a fantastic impact play. If we need a goal, he's probably one of the go-to guys if it gets to a point where it's right, let's just go a bit more direct. We're winning loads of corners, we're winning loads of free kicks. He's the guy that can be one of the danger men from a set piece, and he could be really effective in that way. But I don't know, maybe it's just maybe I don't know, it's just so many. It could be one of, is he just feeling the pressure of being in this new system? The price tag, I don't know, but I think if I'm Arteta, I'm not obviously, but I don't know anywhere near as much as he does, of course, but it kind of feels like a very obvious thing to do, just like take him out of the firing line a little bit, because if he has a bad game on Sunday as well, like that's a Sky game, Super Sunday, whatever, he's going to be the guy that is just going to get it. Like if he makes a mistake or he does anything wrong, we don't win the game, he's going to be the scapegoat, and no one really wants to see that. So it'll be really, we're going to talk about United afterwards. It's just going to be very interesting to see how he sets us up.
I agree with what you said, Miles, which is essentially, I think essentially the manager's trying to do too much, almost, in like there's too many compromises now in this team, where like either you're changing things up or you've got new, right? And we got very lucky last season. I told you, like, goes back to like the first half of the season, where actually all of our signings, they came in and they basically hit the ground running. Zinchenko came in, was brilliant. Gabriel Jesus came in, was brilliant. Who else was there? Saliba came in, brilliant. That, let's be honest, isn't normal, right? Like, signings do take time to bed in. Okay. And actually this season, I know, and I said it, like, we've seen where Rice comes in and seen how good he is and how he fits in. You've seen how good Timber was before his injury. If one of the players takes a little while longer, that's okay, right? But the manager needs to adapt and understand that. Don't throw in a new player into a new system, playing a new position, and then change your defense and change your midfield and change a number of things around him, right? You need to set your players up for success. You set your new signings up for success. And I think if you're going to play Havertz, right, play Havertz. I don't mind if Havertz starts on Sunday. I do agree, Miles, there is a big chance it goes horribly wrong if we do, and then he is like completely ridiculed and castigated for whatever happens. But like, if we play the back four that we can do, play Zinchenko, play Gabriel, play Saliba, play Ben White, pick one of Rice and Partey at the base. I'd say pick Rice, then play Havertz, Odegaard, Saka, Martinelli, Jesus, or Nketiah. You can then finally really assess Havertz for what he's kind of been brought in to do. Because right now, like, especially those two fullbacks, losing, like, basically changing our two fullbacks means that, like you said, with Saka loses Ben White. And, that whole, for all of last season, that right side was Ben White, Saka, Odegaard, right? They did that thing on the right-hand side. You take Odegaard out, you take Ben White out, you've basically got these two left footers, and then you've got Partey, who kind of didn't really get involved with them. And then on the left side, like, Kiwior was, I thought, pretty decent, but he's not going to do what Zinchenko does. And then he's going to be taking away from Havertz and Martinelli as well. And on top of that, you've got Havertz, who's a new player who still hasn't really figured out where to go when Martinelli goes and all that stuff, right? So I think, yeah, like you said earlier on, Mize, eventually this might pay off because we've got a bit of familiarity when there's a few injuries. But for a game like United, I hope he goes back to going back to like what we know works and then just tweaking it with Havertz rather than putting Havertz into chaos. Because I think he's not really being helped by the manager, I don't think.
Before we properly springboard onto the United game, one quick thing, or one and a half quick things that I just wanted to bring up. The half thing was just got to give props to Eddie for coming off the bench and scoring, such a quality finish. But let's quickly talk about the story about this guy who we signed last season in the summer, Portuguese fella, for about 30 odd million. And over the course of last season, he scored a banger against Brentford. He did a good cross in one Europa League game. And against Villa away, he got 2 assists, which, for fantasy Premier League levels, they are assists. Technically, they're assists, but, they're probably very basic passes in reality. Aside from that, he was a guy that whenever he came on, looked pretty lost, looked like he wasn't really at the Premier League level, let alone Arsenal level. Was very skinny, very slight, didn't really have much confidence, and effectively really never really added anything, never made us better at all. This bloke comes on Saturday. The second he walks on the pitch, he's moving like prime Alexis Sanchez, like just gliding, like just demanding the ball from free kicks, gliding, making passes like Ozil. I mean, the assist to Eddie was like, it reminded me of, I think, one of Ozil's first assists for Arsenal. It might have been his first assist where he was assisted Giroud. Yeah, maybe was that one? Giroud. Yeah. Do you remember his left? It was just phenomenal. Like, it was pinpoint precision, and he then nearly scores this absolute worldy scissor kick. Like, to try it in the first place, to connect with it is another thing. I mean, mate,
where did that come from?
I don't know where exactly. Like, what has happened? Someone give me some answers as to how we got that performance from a guy who.
Yeah, I mean, do you reckon this is? Oh, look, he wasn't really. He was obviously on the bench for most games, but he wasn't really near the first team last season. Like, there was never a game where you thought this was a game for Fabio Vieira, right? When we were looking at the team sheets and stuff. But do you think this is a result of? I mean, it could be one of a million reasons, but the fact that we now have a very competitive and pretty deep squad, and there's loads of games now, right? There's actually loads of like proper games when you add the Champions League into it. Do you think he's just like sort of turned up and thought like, okay, when my chance comes and we need a goal, and I'm not just coming on when we're 5-0 up in a game, and Arteta needs me, I'm gonna like, kind of like what Eddie's doing, right? Eddie's like taking his chance when he gets it, when Jesus is injured, makes it quite hard to drop him. Do you reckon there's a bit of that in there? Like, because honestly, mate, I don't have a clue where that came from. Like you say, it's just, yeah, he looked like a player I've not seen yet from him. Like, for
just looked like a different player, didn't he? Like,
yeah,
it's a cliche thing to say, but different player.
Completely, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm just as kind of bemused as you guys are, to be honest.
Because Aaron, I mean, to my point, I mean, there were some times last season, right, where things weren't going so well, and he comes on, and I think we're all hoping, oh, maybe this is the game, and he more often than not made us seem worse, to be honest. Yeah. And I remember at pre-season, like watching him in pre-season, and he really didn't look very good in pre-season either. He didn't look like he'd put on any weight. In some of the training videos, I remember there was one that was going around. It sounded like the coaches were having a go at him for not, doing enough. I thought, well, what the hell, what's going on with this guy? And then, you strengthen the squad and you think, really, is he going to get much opportunity? But, I mean, what a performance. I mean, surely, if there's something that we can kind of cling on to say that was a huge positive, like, and potentially a phenomenal positive for the rest of the season, to think that now, if you bring on Fabio Vieira in a game, that's the level I think I'm going to get. That's a game changer. I'm thinking a very different way now, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to be fair, like, I go back to the point I just made, right? When I listed all of our signings and said we got really lucky all of our signings hit the ground running last season. That Vieira didn't. We just didn't mention him. Then I said, look, some players don't hit the ground running in their first season. He's hopefully going to be the perfect example of actually some players you just need to give a little bit of time. They need to figure out what's going on, have a good preseason, like have a break, come in, understand things. And no, I thought it was ridiculous. I'm really angry with Leno for saving that bicycle. I know it was offside and stuff, but it would have been like phenomenal. I think even at the end he had a shot which I think the keeper saved as well. No, he was very, very good. I hope this is like, if he can do that coming on, or even like if he can start. I always thought actually he was far better off on the right hand side as a kind of in the Odegaard role rather than on the left. Every time he played on the left, he'd never really looked good. But maybe that wasn't a positional thing. Maybe he was just not that good last year, and actually. He maybe he's just got a bit more energy. He's maybe worked on his fitness. I don't know. But yeah, he was fantastic. One of the very few positives from Saturday.
And now that we've delved into that brief bit of positivity, well, I think we've generally done quite a good job of keeping the tone positive. Let's just really focus on that United game. So we've talked about some stuff which have sort of alluded to the things that Arteta could do against United. What do we think? Answer Charles's question here. Would love to get your take on United's strategy. Either go back to square one or keep the system and just personnel changes. What would you do, Miles? Would you go back to the 4 at the back? And I presume if it is a 4 at the back, then it will be the Zinchenko, Gabriel coming. Let's just assume Zinchenko, Gabriel comes back in and then go for a very similar 2 midfielders in the centre. Let's just say, for argument's sake, it's Partey and Rice, and then the Odegaard and the Martinelli and the Saka and someone up front. Would you do that?
Back 4, yeah. So, I mean, I think I sort of said it before. I think go back to what worked last season. I have a feeling that he's not going to, because it's Arteta, and I think he's going to be a little bit like stubborn in the sense he's going to try and prove that, yeah, look, I've chosen this system or I've gone with this system and I'm going to keep persevering with it and I'm going to prove everyone wrong kind of thing. I think he's got that kind of mentality. I hope I'm wrong. But look, I hope he goes with the same, like all 4 of those defenders are fit now. It looks like Zinchenko's back. He's come on as a sub in the last couple of games. And Gabriel's fresh because he's not playing any football pretty much. So yeah, I would go with White, Saliba, Gabriel and Zinchenko. The midfield's really interesting because I kind of look at Man United's midfield, and let's assume it's Casemiro, Eriksen and Bruno. I don't know if you need Partey and Rice in that. And given that we're at home as well, like I know Rice can play, you could play Partey as your deepest midfielder and then play Rice and Odegaard ahead, but Rice hasn't really done that for us yet, like properly. I wonder if he just plays one holding midfielder, which I call it a holding midfielder, but it's not really a holding midfielder, but basically play Rice. I assume it would be Rice. You then have Zinchenko that obviously slots in alongside him every time we've got the ball. And that, like I was saying before, that might just give Havertz a little bit more freedom ahead of those midfielders. I don't know. Like if you go with Partey and Rice at home, even if it is Man United, I don't know. I just don't feel like you need to do that personally. Yeah,
he's also got the risk, hasn't he? Where if he, this is probably not the right way to look at it, but let's just say he does revert to last season's system, and let's just say that involves dropping Havertz. If we win, it becomes a bit of a weird scenario with the fans. I feel like the fans' natural reaction will be like, see, we won because Havertz wasn't in the team. Yeah. And then you start suddenly, then that
I think he plays Havertz on Sunday. I think he'll play Havertz on Sunday. I just hope that he does like what I said. I hope he goes. I think we all just want to see the back 4 that worked really well last season, especially now they're all fit. Like there was so much of the season last season where one of those players wasn't fit, especially Saliba, especially Zinchenko. They all look to be back. Like, just go with it. And yeah, I think he'll go. I think he'll stick with Havertz because if he's going to change back, if he's going to revert systems, I can't see him. Yeah, I can't see him taking Havertz out personally, and I don't think that's a bad thing because I think I want to see what Havertz will do in the system we played last season and basically try and play that Xhaka role. But yeah, like I mean, are we previewing the game now? Are we moving straight on to United?
Yeah.
United are just like it's really annoying because they don't look good. Obviously, we didn't watch the game on Saturday; just saw the highlights because we were obviously at the Arsenal game. But like from everything I've seen from this season, they just don't look. What's the word? I mean, you look at the goals that they conceded against Forest. Like they're so open; it's unbelievable how open. I know one of their goals came from a corner and a counter attack, but like I don't rate Lisandro Martinez that much. There's no Luke Shaw, so I think they played Dallo at left back. Casemiro just looks like his legs have maybe it's a bit harsh. His legs have gone. I know he's still a very good player, and I'm sure when he gets on the ball and if everything's like nice for them, then great. You know, he probably looks really good. But as soon as like he's exposed or he's left on his own, I feel like he doesn't look like half the player he used to be. And I kind of feel like that's what we need to do. Like we need to do what we've done against United at home in the last few seasons. Just go for them. And I think they're there for the taking. But my worry is that we're not really in a kind of position of strength at the moment in terms of so many things, like everything we've just spoken about, right? Like there's so many question marks and so many things that we're not sure on. It feels like we're coming to this game like probably quite nervous. So that's my worry is that United is still a dangerous team. They've obviously still got very good players, but it's one of those where we say this every week, right? If Arsenal turn up, Arsenal win the game. But I'm a little bit worried about our form, not form in terms of results, but just form in terms of performances. And are we going to take the game to United? And are we going to try to dominate like we should? Because I think if we do that, then I think we have enough to win it. But it's just, it feels like a bit of a tricky one, this one. I'm actually going to go for a draw. I don't know if, we haven't talked about predictions yet, but I'm actually going to go for a draw. I think we might slip up. And yeah, I can see like a score draw of 2-2.
That becomes then a little bit of a problem for us, doesn't it? If that happens. So you see us, because what I was going to say is last season, one of the really good things that we did for the first 3 quarters of the season, I know in the last bit it wasn't quite like this, but for the first 3 quarters of the season, whenever we did drop points and it didn't look like quite as good a performance, it always felt like we'd come back 100 miles an hour in the next game. It felt like Arteta was doing a really, really good job of getting their mentality right. And maybe, like one of you said, when, I think it was you, Miles, when I asked you about Arteta's comments, and you sort of said, maybe some of the stuff that he's saying is because of the, building the confidence of the team, if you like. And maybe that was playing a part in his mind. He was like, I know that I need to get them in a frame of mind for United, and this is the way that I know works with them. Maybe there's a little bit of that. But what you're suggesting is perhaps that, no, like, we could slip up again. And I guess my question to you then would be, then we desperately need the international break to then work it all out again, really, don't we?
I mean, what we desperately need is not desperately need, but what we need is a win. I mean, if what I predict happens, it's not so much about we need the international break, mate. I think it's more there's just stuff to sort. Like, okay, fine, I get what you mean. Like a couple of weeks off, but half the players are not going to be there to kind of look at the things and work on the things that we're not doing right. I mean, who knows? In terms of, I'm not saying that we're going to play badly, and I'm not saying that I'm not saying that we're going to play badly and draw. I kind of just feel like it's going to be a bit of a. I feel like both teams are, like United. I feel like we can score goals against, but I also feel like even though we haven't really conceded that many goals this season, we don't look as assured, and there's this question mark over the defense. There's this question mark. We're conceding chances. Like we are. I know we didn't concede because I think Fulham had like 3 shots on goal yesterday, but even so, it still feels like, I don't know, mate. I just don't have that confidence in our defense yet. And if he goes to that back 4 that we all probably want him to, most of us want him to, then maybe my opinion changes a little bit. But I have this nagging feeling that he's not going to, and he's going to stick with Partey at right back. which will be disappointed. I will be a bit annoyed about if that's what happens. But yeah, and like I feel like obviously, look, if you're Man United, your season hasn't really it hasn't started that great. Obviously, had a really poor performance against Wolves. What was their second game again?
It was Spurs.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, of course. So yeah, a disappointment against Spurs, and then 2-0 down at home to Forest within 5 minutes or whatever is shocking. And fine, they were able to come back. But they obviously got a bit lucky with the penalty. So I feel like for United, this might be the game that they target as let's turn up and let's show what we're about type of mentality when they come into it, and that's not really a good thing for us, Yeah, so I'm kind of not really putting much confidence in both teams' defenses, and I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw. 2-2 draw.
Interesting. Aaron, what about you, mate? Because United, we always joke about United in the sense that it doesn't really matter how United are doing; they always seem to sort of turn up against us. That being said,
Fred is gone, so that's good.
Fred is gone. Fred is gone. McTominay is still there, right? He's still hanging around like a bad smell. But you got him, and then last season, last season we still did get the win at home, and it's interesting, right? Because we're playing them without Shaw, in a situation where they haven't things aren't really clicking, and when you talk about things aren't really clicking for us compared to them, it's very different. It's. They are looking completely empty in the middle of the park for some reason. People are just running through them every time. That's not really happening with us, as we've covered a couple of stupid errors on the weekend. And yes, we're not playing as fluid, but there's still we still look okay. What do you think? Do you think that Man United could do something against us, or are you more confident than Mice?
I am a bit more confident. I would be very annoyed if we drop points to Man United. Just because, like Myers, I don't really see what they're about this season. They've got some, decent players. Fernandes is obviously a very decent player. Rashford on his day, for 10 games last season was the form of his life. Varane can be very good. Martinez, on his day, depending on the game, could be decent, but they're also they've shown that all of them actually just have games and moments where they just don't do what they're good at. And I think you get that a lot with United, where they're just this very muddled team that go between pace, kind of that pace and power vibe versus the technical vibe versus the defensive solidity vibe. And you don't really know what they're trying to do fully. But they've got enough good players where they'll pick up enough points. You saw it against Wolves where they got battered, I thought, but they had enough to just take their chance and ride out all of their defensive errors. So yeah, I would be very, very annoyed if we drop points to this Man United team, because I just think we're so much better than them. And the only way we do is if we do something stupid. So I think if what Mice thinks could happen, where he just sticks with that system that we've played so far for no real reason, if Zinchenko and Gabriel are all available, for me would be absolutely bonkers. Why would you do that? If Zinchenko's fit, if Gabriel's fit, we know Saliba and White are going to be fit. There's no logical reason why you'd instead go and pick Kiwior at left back. I guess Tomiyasu will be back technically because he won't be suspended anymore. Over Zinchenko. And play a back three with Partey at right back. And I think the only reason you do that is if you, for some reason, you really, really want Partey, Rice, Odegaard, and Havertz on the same pitch. I mean, Odegaard probably plays regardless, but Partey, Rice, and Havertz all together. And I don't think you need to do that. I think you basically need to pick two out of the three. And I think, look, on form, you probably pick Partey and Rice, but actually, if you want to get the best out of most players in that position, you pick. I think Rice is best as a 6, Partey is best as a 6, so you pick one of them, and I think you pick Rice because he's the future. Put him at the 6, then you say who is the best player to play at left 8, and then it's a question of do you trust Havertz for one more game, and I think you probably give him the benefit of the doubt to say, look, it's a big game, you've got you're surrounded by much more familiarity. Everyone else knows how everyone else plays, so put him as a left 8, or you take a punt and play Partey as a 6 and Declan Rice as an 8 if you really want to. But I don't really see that happening. So yeah, and I think if you do that,
or you play Maradona, aka Fabio Vieira, in there.
yeah. You could even say, look, Vieira's he deserves to be rewarded, and you drop Havertz, you play Rice, and then you play Vieira in front. Yeah, that could work. And then it's a case of like, who do you pick up front? Is Jesus fit enough, or do you actually reward Eddie for his hard work, or do you even stick with Trossard and give Trossard another go? And you pick one of those three. And I think that should be it. Like, I'm going to be really, really frustrated and annoyed if Thomas Partey is lining up at right back and there's no Gabriel and Zinchenko is not playing for. If it's anything other than the fitness, I'm going to be really frustrated.
Imagine it's Partey versus Rashford. I mean, no one wants to see that.
No. Exactly. Maybe I think that's another reason why he might. You kind of just pick Ben White there.
Yeah, but is there like there's a bit of a stick or twist type gambler's scenario here, right? Where he could look at it and go, all right, well, I've invested in this system for 3 games. And so
you say that, but we never
played
played that in pre-season. We once played that system, right? So it can't be part of the long-term plan. I don't believe it is.
Maybe not long-term plan, but let's say, for example, this game against Man United probably represents the toughest game in this like run of 4, right? So it's effectively been this build up to the United game, then international break. In some ways, it feels odd to me that if you look at that game just as a 4-game sequence, he would play a system for the first 3 games, and then for that toughest game, suddenly go, actually, okay, no, fine, I'm going to go to a different system and go back to last season's system. Because 2 things, right? Yeah, one is you basically say in his mind he could say, well, I've invested in this system for 3 games. Surely they can nail it on the 4th game. They're going to be able to nail it better on the 4th game than they were on the 3rd and the 2nd, whatever. And then he's also got that risk to say, if he goes back to the old system, they haven't played that system for a number of weeks, and they've probably been training with this other system during whole period.
They played it the whole of last season. Like, they should. Like, I don't think for me, that's not a reason to not go with it. Like, you've basically, who's changed? It's just Saka and Havertz are the only 2 players that would be different in that system. If you go with everyone else, like, that's for me, that's not a reason to not go with it.
Yeah, I think. Look, and I also think that means if you do that, you're leaving Zinchenko on the bench and Gabriel on the bench, and I think Arteta just loves. I don't know. He might do something.
Could play Zinchenko in that 6. Sorry, in the 8.
Or as an 8, you could do that, and then you play maybe Tomiyasu at left back, but play a 4, and like a more traditional 4, and I think it's really, really important you have Ben White on that right side to really just help Saka, because that combination works really well. And we saw it because we did it. It looked like we did it for the last kind of 10, 15 minutes against Fulham. Because on our side, we didn't see Ben White, and then all of a sudden we just saw him all the time.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show, like, look, Saka's brilliant. Without Ben White, he can still be brilliant. I don't think, but I think if you're a defender, I think it's very, very easy to just double up on Saka when you don't have to worry. When you've got Kiwior on that side, for example. Kiwior, is that right? No, when you've got Thomas Partey on that side. Because Thomas Partey isn't going to be running up and down the wings. You can just put 2 defenders on Saka and just kick him, push him off the ball. And as good as he is, Saka can't deal with that. You put another player there to just distract that extra defender, and Saka can just work his magic that little bit easier. And when Saka is on the ball, good things happen, and that's kind of what we need to be doing.
Do you so if you guys had to put money on it, say you had a lot of money, let's say 500 quid, do you put money on Gabriel starting on Sunday or not starting?
Well, I've had Gabriel on my fantasy football team, and I've started him every week, and he hasn't played. So shows what I know. Look, I think it purely depends on if Zinchenko is fit.
Let's assume he's fit, because he's come on in the last couple of games.
Yeah. Then I think you start Zinchenko, you start Gabriel. I'm trying to think through it. Is there a system you play where he could do? Look, I'll tell you what would be really concerning and would make me go with all these conspiracy theories that something personal is up with Gabriel is if he does Zinchenko, Kiwior, Saliba, White. If he does that, then
or you could do Zinchenko, Saliba, White, Tomiyasu at right back.
Zinchenko, Saliba. Yeah, he could. Yeah, if he does that. Yeah, if he does that.
One of those two. Yeah.
Then I would be very concerned.
I wouldn't be surprised. I actually wouldn't be surprised if
I can almost see it. I can see him doing that, right? And I can see us being the logic. Well, the logic is like you said, Rashford is on that side, so you put Tomiyasu there.
Yeah.
I don't know who Man United's. Yeah, Anthony. No one cares about Anthony, so just let Zinchenko deal with him, and that's that, and that's why he did it. So you can't drop Ben White. That's nonsense. If he plays that back four, then something is very. Gabriel must have, I don't know, slept with Arteta's wife or something like that. Because
I know what you mean. Yeah.
That's bad. But the reason I don't think it's that bad is Gabriel did come on in the first two games as a sub, so he didn't come on yesterday. But I mean, it'd been a bit weird to bring him on. Maybe you should have brought him on at 2-1. Actually, we might not have conceded, but exactly. I don't think there's anything personal. I think this is purely a result of Zinchenko not being fit and him wanting someone else to invert. So he picks Partey, and that shifts everything and kind of breaks a lot of things everywhere. And maybe, for example, if Timber was fit, you play him on the left and tell him to do what Zinchenko is doing, and you can actually keep things a bit balanced. That Timber injury has really screwed us in terms of Zinchenko backup, and it means we're just forcing things out of shape. But
it's mad though if you think about it, right? Like, because we think, I mean, like you said, and personally, I think it comes down to if Zinchenko is fit or not. Because if he is fit, and if Arteta thinks, he's fit enough to start a game, you talk about on the base of last season, one of the best left backs in the world. You'd have to say, on how he performed last season, and
going forward, certainly, defensively,
I know what you mean. So pound for pound kind of thing, and particularly given the way that we play that left back role, he's just an incredible football player. So you'd think that this is exactly the sort of game that you would need him for. The thing that I struggle to picture a little bit is I genuinely can see us going back to that 4. And if Zinchenko is fit, I think we will. I find it hard to see Havertz working in that Xhaka role based on just what we saw in the last few games. It's not that I don't think there's a future to that. Maybe there is a future to playing Havertz in that role. But I agree with the sentiments I think that you guys had on Havertz, which I think it's just not quite there yet. Maybe it's a confidence thing. Maybe it's whatever. In this role, just playing as a kind of lone, not alone, but, playing, with one less midfielder in some ways, like it's just another new thing for him to do. And it's another thing where I think he'll just have a lot of responsibility that he's not quite used to yet in this side. I'm not sure if I can see Arteta doing that. I actually can see a scenario where we start him, but we start him up front and we play Rice and Partey in the middle. And I know that would seem really harsh on Eddie. That would seem really harsh on Jesus if Jesus is fit. But again, it's like one of those surprise things. It's probably something that they don't think that we'll do. So I don't know.
I can't see that, mate. Just because if that doesn't work, the criticism that he's going to get is going to be even more than just sticking to the current system and maybe changing up personnel. Do you know what I mean? Like if you go with, did Havertz play through the middle in the Charity Shield? Didn't he?
Yes. Yeah.
We played like the diamond with like Declan Rice on the left of the diamond.
I'd be really surprised if he did that. I mean, look, if he does, then fair enough. But I don't know if this system's not working, and he goes with something like that where you're basically taking. It feels like it's an even bigger risk. And Eddie scoring goals, Jesus is back fit. Yeah, I'd be really surprised personally.
So I'm gonna go for a 3-1 win for Arsenal though. I think that we will do. I think that it will be a game where the fans will be the best that we've been this season, because the fans haven't been that great. But I don't think it's, and as we blame the fans' fault. I think, again, one of you mentioned the fact that there's the expectations are a little bit higher now, and I think that the early kickoff on the first game didn't necessarily help the atmosphere. The 3 o'clock on this game didn't help with the train strikes. I think people probably weren't as tanked up as they were usually. I know it's a Sunday, but it's a Sunday late kickoff and it's Man United. I think that everyone will be well up for it. And I think the players will be too. I feel like the players are up for these sort of games at the Emirates, and they were last season. I think they'll be that way again. And I think Man United don't, their record against the big teams, against, under Ten Hag, like last season, was really bad, wasn't it? It was like they didn't beat anyone in the top 9 or something ridiculous like this, like away from home or something. So it's not great. I feel like with Man United, a lot of their senior players feel almost annoyed to be playing in a team that isn't that good yet. There's something like just it feels like Varane and Casemiro, for example, are there kind of going like, yeah, but we used to play for Real Madrid, man. Like, we were always favourites to win the league, or is that, or we every year it was the league or the Champions League. Like, I don't know, there's something about them that it just feels like it's not quite there, and they're not that up for it when it comes to games like this, where it really means a lot for Arsenal and stuff. And so I personally, I'm going to go for a 3-1 win. I think we'll concede because we're at home and we always concede at home. I was going to go for a 3-2, but I don't think it's going to be that. I think it's going to be 3-1. Aaron, what about you?
Yeah, I think we'll win 2-1. I was going to say 1-0, and then you reminded me how we always concede at home, so I changed it to 2-1. I think it'll be like one of those tight games, but we will just have enough in the box. I think it'll be an Odegaard type game where he just decides to just run this whole show and just push us over the line.
Fingers crossed, Dave. Fingers crossed. Well, listen, guys, it's been a mammoth episode. It's been nearly 1.5 hours. I should say, thank you for everyone for joining us. We had a fair amount of viewers today, so really appreciate it. And Charles, thank you very much for your comments. Shani, as well, as always, really appreciate you guys. It was great. It's really great having the comments and the questions. It just gives us another element. It feels like this is a much bigger discussion with more people. So that was fun. So, Mize, Aaron, thank you both. Look forward to seeing you both on Sunday again. It feels like just a lot of, I think it's because, Mize, you and I went to the Palace game as well. It feels like seeing you guys a lot. Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Just joking.
But yeah, let's hope that we bounce back with a win, boys?
Yeah, it'll be nice. It'll be very nice to get a win against United, as always. But yeah.
Aaron, for his family rivalry with his brother, the Man United fan, bragging rights.
You're on mute, mate.
Oh yeah,
I just assumed it was.
Sorry.
Me.
Yeah, no. I family derby type thing. So I mean, they've always been the old enemy. So, but this, that game's always been a big highlight. After Spurs, I always look for Man United. I'm sure you guys do too, to be honest.
Yeah, but the two big rivalries. Yeah.
So I'll see you Sunday. It'll be a good one.
Excellent. All right, boys. Good night.
See you later.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.